Hey
Cool.
guys, thanks for watching. This is JP, who I have mistakenly up until now called Jean Philippe. It's actually Jan Philippe. He's German, so excuse the confusion. He actually used to work at two FAANG companies in growth, and now is the co-founder of Bits for Digits, which we're going to talk about later. Hello, Jan.
Yeah, thanks, Alex, for having me. Really appreciate it. And yeah, no worries. As I mentioned, everyone always assumes I'm French based off my name, but most people just call me JP. That tends to be the easiest way to go.
JP is an easier way to go, and it does lead to less confusion because I really, really were so confident you were French.
maybe it's my looks. Maybe I just look French.
I don't think you necessarily look French or German. It's just the name is just, it seems like such a common combination for a French person. Jean
Yeah, Jean
Philippe. And it
Philippe
also
sounds a
sounds
lot
good,
cooler
Jean
than Jan
Philippe.
Philippe for sure.
We got a small window into your childhood before starting to record, but I would like to know more about how you grew up, stuff like that.
Yeah, so I'm originally from a very small town close to Cologne in Germany. So people from Cologne always ask me, like, okay, which town? And they still never know. So it's called Leichling. It's really, really small. But after growing up there, I moved to do my bachelor's in Hamburg in pretty run of the mill business and economics. I'm one of those terrible, terrible people that always knew from a like the child age already, I want to study business one day. And that's exactly what I did. And after studying my bachelor's here in Germany, I then moved to no to Denmark first to do my master's there in Copenhagen. Very, very beautiful city. I love the university. And after my master's, and obviously like a bunch of like stops for internships and yeah semesters abroad, I then moved to Ireland to work for first Facebook and then Google. And Dublin, Ireland, here in Europe, is a pretty common destination for tech jobs because most of the big American tech companies, at least, are headquartered there.
Yeah, yeah, it's for tax purposes, I believe.
I don't think I can comment.
Okay, I'll comment myself. It's for tax purposes.
They tell us it's for many reasons, right?
I mean, I'm sure like Ireland is like has pretty good infrastructure. I've heard good things about it. Never heard a bad thing about Ireland, except
Yeah.
the accent is very thick, but otherwise nothing bad.
Yeah, it got a bit took a bit of time getting used to. But to be honest, Ireland is also a super international city, so most people there are actually expats, or at least in the circles where I went around. So everyone's from somewhere else. So
It's
that's not too big of
I
a
think it's
problem.
a very deceiving country because it's small and you tend to
Yeah,
ignore it. You don't know that it's actually a pretty important place.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It is only has like 5 million people living there. That is a small country.
Oh, actually, here's a little fun trivia, I guess. I actually
Yeah.
read a few days ago this thing where it was saying that there are actually more Irish Americans in the like in the US than there are Irish people in Ireland, which is not the case for I guess no other country. Pretty big.
I know there's a lot of Irish people that have left Ireland. I haven't heard of that stat yet, but it wouldn't surprise me.
I
Maybe
think it
maybe
was
it's like second generation, right? Could it is it like people that left Ireland who then moved to the US, or maybe they have Irish parents? I think there's a lot of Irish
yes,
heritage in the United States.
the explanation was that basically, like, unlike, for example, Italians, Irish people started emigrating in the 1850s. And
Hmm.
then also, obviously, Ireland had a lot of like turmoil in the last century. So that's kind of where this huge discrepancy comes from. And there's
Yeah,
like a lot more Irish Americans, which is kind of crazy. How was your time
yeah.
in Ireland?
I had a pretty good time. So joining like these tech companies is a bit like going to college all over again. So I think I was 25 when I joined Facebook, and that felt like about the average age of the office. Maybe it was a bit higher, but it's definitely still in the 20s. And it is sort of as fun as you see it. And some of the YouTube videos, you can play ping pong wherever you want. There's like breakfast, lunch, and dinner served for you. Yeah, obviously, it's also a lot of work, but they do make sure that you have a good time while you're there. And then you also meet hundreds of people from hundreds of different, or not hundreds, but like 100 different countries. And no, I had a very good time there. And I think I also had to up my alcohol tolerance a bit while I was there, because one of those stereotypes is like sometimes stereotypes are pretty true, and I feel like for Ireland they
Yeah.
can drink pretty well.
That's I've never been to Ireland, but I've been to the UK, and like the
Yeah,
two things that I can nor three things which are very stereotypical and I have noticed straight away was one, the accent is totally different because I've learned English from American movies,
yeah.
and then definitely they get drunk, like they get really drunk. They have a whole culture around getting drunk, which is not to say that Romania doesn't have one. I'm just saying, and the rain, just constant rain.
Yep. That's very true.
Which one you joined first? I think you joined Google first.
I joined Facebook first.
And how did you join it?
So, towards the end of my master's degree, I was writing my master's thesis, and I was sort of wondering, okay, what do I want to do after? And I always knew I wanted to eventually become a startup founder. I just felt it was too early. I don't know if that's true or not, to be honest. I don't know if I learned that much in my corporate career that was super transferable to founding a startup. I, to be honest, think I could have maybe just done it a bit earlier. But at least I felt, okay, I still have to get something in between like my college education and then founding something. And I was looking into completely different avenues. I mean, everyone I knew sort of went into consulting. I knew some people going into investment banking, like the super classical stuff. I knew I didn't really want to do either of those things. Tech was then another alternative. And to be honest, Facebook, I applied because a friend of mine applied and told me you can apply here without submitting a CV. Without submitting a cover letter. And I was like, so easy. I already have my CV prepared. I'll just upload it. And then, fortunately, they invited me for an interview to then come to Dublin. I was like, okay, I was never in Dublin before. It's a free trip at least. I'll have a look at the office. And I don't know if I was even that intent on joining. But when I interviewed there, I met like crazy amount of like super cool, very talented people. I really had a great time there. I loved the office, and they made me an offer. And I was like, okay, that's good. And I was like still very happy with the decision. Like I had a great time there.
How long were you at Facebook?
Not super long, so about a year and a half. And
Nice,
then
nice.
I moved to Google because these companies are big corporations, and thus they're very, very structured internally. And they have levels that you basically join. And because I was just a recent college grad, I joined the lowest level, level one. And then it's a pretty predictable path of how you progress, i.e., make more salary, get into new job roles, transition to other countries, that kind of stuff. And I knew, okay, it's going to take me X amount to get to level two, then to level three, da 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 da. And I knew that also one of the teams I wanted to join worked with app clients because that was sort of the internal cool kids. That's where also a lot of the money was made. And in sales, that's obviously a good place to be. And then a recruiter from Google reached out to me asking, hey, do you want to interview for this very specific role just in Google? And I was like, hell yeah. And thus it was a bit of like a jump in terms of like levels, obviously, then also salary, but also I got to work immediately in like the team that does the exact same thing that I wanted to do just in Facebook. But in Facebook, it would have taken me years to get there. So yeah, that's why I only stayed there about a year and a half, I'd say.
I have noticed and I have been told, and just this thing which apparently is considered a fact and apparently is data backed, where like job jumping every 1 to 3 years is actually conducive towards moving up the ranks. You're going to move up the ranks faster, and I tend to believe it's actually true, but I think it sucks. What do you think about it?
I wouldn't do it too often, to be honest, because at some point you have the reputation of, okay, we hired this guy, in 2 years he's gone, and I
Yeah.
don't think anyone wants that either. And I don't know if that's an apt comparison, but if you look at the people that have had really stellar careers at these companies, they've all been there for a very long time. Maybe it was just not as common to jump between the different tech companies as frequently back then, so I don't know what that's why I would second guess if that's really a good way to think about it. But I think in the early stages it makes a lot of sense. You also get insights into other companies. That's also super important. You can bring that back to wherever you want to end up in the end of the day. But I wouldn't switch between like 7 different tech companies.
Yeah, I think I agree with your take. I recently, and by the time this is gonna get published, I will have already left my current job. So
Oh,
I
congrats.
recently had to quit, and it's after a year and 3 or 4 months right now. So
Yeah,
it's been a tough decision because it's like it was a very specific situation, which I'm not gonna go into on video, but I kind of
yeah,
wanted to stay because the team was amazing there, and
yeah,
it was a very tough decision. So this is why I say I think that this situation where you kind of have to jump every few years for at least the early part of your career. I think it sucks because sometimes you get lucky, like I did, and you find a job you actually like, and you don't want to jump.
yeah. I mean, it's also about what do you want out of your career and what's important to you. I think there's also a lot of people that I know that have been, for example, at Google for like 8 or 10 years, and they sort of just like what they do. They like their job. They don't mind it not changing for a few years. They're sort of just very comfortable in their situation, and that's obviously fine too.
Google pays really well too, so that helps.
They do pretty okay.
Which actually makes me question, and so I'm always like I'm kind of an employee mentality, kind of an entrepreneur mentality. I'm not even sure. I'm completely on the fence. So I always like to hear the case for one or the other. And since you left what could have been a very lengthy and nice career at FAANG for doing your own startup, how do you make the case for that in your own mind?
So for me, it's sort of the default stereotype founder thing to say, the regret minimization. But I always knew I'd regret it if I didn't try founding a startup. And I also am very conscious of the fact that there's time windows in life. So I think I know a lot of people that always say, yeah, I want to found a startup, where I think they never will, because they're always like, okay, now I'll just do this next career step. Okay, I'll climb the corporate ladder a bit more, make more money, have more savings, have better connections, yada yada yada. And all of a sudden, they're like in their mid to late 30s, they have a family, and they're like, it's actually a lot of risk to do it now. So
Yeah.
if you don't really commit to it at any stage, then I think you're just not going to do it. So that paired with, I had a very short list of people that I knew or was friends with that I would have founded a company with. And during the pandemic, so my co-founder's name is Lawrence. The two of us sort of started talking about founding a startup together. And I always knew, like, okay, if this guy would do it with me, I'll do it, because he is very talented, very very driven, and I felt like, okay, this could be a good team. So the fact that that opportunity also aligned, I was like, okay, it's now or never, or maybe not now or never, but like now is really a good time.
I think you're perfectly right. There is a timing for everything in life, and definitely when you're 35 and you have a family and you've already been in the golden handcuffs for so long, it's going to be a very hard decision to make.
It is.
But,
It is.
and this is, I guess, a good segue into what your company does. You could have, instead of done a startup, you could have bought a company. Why not buy a company?
I wasn't super aware of like buying this like company as a means to entrepreneurship method quite then and there. So the maybe story behind Bits for Digits is we're an acquisition marketplace, so you can buy and sell companies on the marketplace. But we didn't start out as such. So we started out specifically as a marketplace for so called partial buyouts. That means you buy shares in startups, not as a means of fundraising, but a so called secondary transaction. So you, for example, buy the shares of one of the founders, 20% of them. You own a piece of the company, but the money then goes to the founder so they can take some risk off the table, can buy themselves an apartment, something like that. The inspiration behind this model was a transaction between the founders of 37 Signals, the makers of Basecamp, and Jeff Bezos, because Jeff Bezos in the 2000s basically bought a stake of their company. The founders were then independently wealthy enough to say, okay, if Basecamp 37 Signals goes under in the next few years, we'll still be safe. And I mean, has worked out tremendously for them. They're still running it. And we felt like, okay, that's a super, super cool type of transaction that we rarely ever hear of. It does happen in the market, but there's no centralized place that connects these two elements in the market, aka good place for a marketplace. And that's how we started out. And then eventually we added on full transactions as well. That means now you can also buy and sell entire businesses on the platform.
Okay, so there's a few things I want to mention about what you've just said. One,
Yeah,
the guys at 37 Signals have some really good books. I think they're amazing people. And they pointed out certain trends years ago that are happening
yeah,
now. I remember when I didn't even know how to code yet because I'm a engineer. And it was like, I was in high school and I was reading their book, a rework. And I was like,
yeah,
wow, this makes so much sense. I would actually love to have a job if it would be like this.
yeah. They are the masters of. I'm sure they wouldn't like it to be called that, but it's like content marketing. They're fantastic at it. They have great talks. We even got to speak to DHH, one of the founders, about the transaction, and like just even being able to have a Zoom call with a guy was already like a dream come true. It's really really cool.
It's really amazing how you can get to touch these people. How did you meet them?
So DHH is Danish, and my co-founder is also Danish. The three of us all went to the same university, and DHH just has his email address on Twitter. So we just like reached out to him. My co-founder wrote the email in Danish. I think that made it also a bit more personable. And then
Okay,
they just responded. I think it took some time to like book the call, but man, it like took almost an hour. I think it's
that's
very very
awesome.
cool. Yeah, it's.
It's
I
really
mean,
awesome.
we've spoken to quite a few like really high profile people just by like randomly reaching out to them, and I think obviously more often than not it doesn't work. But I'm very surprised by like the type of people that take time out of their super busy schedules just to speak to some like random founders.
Yeah, and sometimes like because one of the reasons why I started this podcast is precisely so that I can go to random cool people and tell them, "Hey, do you want to chat with me?" and make it such that they also get kind of some little thing out of it. And
Yeah,
it does increase my conversion rate of getting random conversation with cool people.
that's true.
But yeah, more people should DM just people, random people. Just learn how to DM. I think it's a major like superpower in today's world.
Yeah, yeah, it is
Do you
very
have
very
any
cool.
tips for like random
Tips?
people? Yeah, because you're a growth guy, you know how to do this better
Yeah,
than
yeah,
me.
yeah. So I mean, I don't know if there's like super super hidden gem tips here, but if there's no common connection, nothing. I usually just send them like an invite on LinkedIn, for example. Say like, hey, just wanted to talk about XYZ. Obviously, of course, if you don't have any time, and then just take the conversation from there. I just randomly reach out to people, and it usually gets at least some sort of conversation going. Obviously, they might not have time for a call, but they can still shoot you a helpful line or two.
So the way I do it, which I don't think I've ever disclosed publicly, is I first follow you on Twitter or somewhere. I warm you up by liking your tweets, commenting on this, commenting. After a few weeks, like 2 weeks, now you might just be aware of my existence, and
Yeah,
now I
yeah,
didn't slide in your DMs. If I also have a referral, like you just said, where you have a mutual connection, that is amazing. But if I don't,
yeah.
I still warmed you up, and that I think it helps. I don't have data to prove it, but I think it helps.
I mean, it sounds like that's a very good idea. I think I'm just not very patient. I usually just go like, I'll just message the person. But I think your way might be better.
Bits for Digits started, which actually now I guess makes sense because it's bits, parts of the company for digits, right?
Yeah,
That's where the name comes from. It started out for partial buyouts,
yeah,
which is very interesting. It's actually what you described earlier because I have never heard of it being called as partial buyout, but I know Facebook shares used to trade over the counter before it
yeah.
went public. Why did you pivot kind of slightly away from that?
So I wouldn't say that we pivoted away from it. So we still have that on the marketplace. It's just that we also added full acquisitions. And I think one of the startup advice that everyone hears is be very focused in the early stages, only do one thing and do it well. And we really took that to heart. And we constantly had founders come to us and say, like, hey, I actually just want to sell my entire business. And we said, no, we only do partial buyouts. Go to one of our now competitors. And then we had a lot of buyers on our platform, right? Small private equity funds, family offices. They always said, hey, you know, we also buy whole businesses, right? And we're like, not here. Go somewhere else. And at some point, it just felt like we were just shooting ourselves in the foot. And we felt, okay, we are an acquisition marketplace. Maybe it's not that important what type of transaction happens on the platform. In many cases, a full acquisition in a negotiation can become a majority buyout where the founder says like, actually, I want to retain whatever 10-15% of the company. And then once it gets sold on later, I want to have like another payday. So I think it didn't muddy the message too much, and then we opened up the marketplace for also these full acquisitions, and that really helped us too. It got a lot more businesses onto the platform, a lot more liquidity, and also opened us up to this type of buyer, which is acquisition entrepreneurs, right? It's people that just buy a business to then run it themselves, and those are usually full acquisitions.
I see. I also wanted to ask you, how did you even decide on this idea? Because it feels like there's so many ideas of startups you could find out there. I used to not have this problem early in my career. I was like, how could you have so many ideas? How could you have 30 domains in your like namecheap account?
Yeah,
It felt impossible back then, but now I fully understand it. As you get, I guess, more mature, you start to get all sorts of ideas. How do you decide
yeah.
on which one to do?
It was very, very difficult. Um, so my co-founder and I tested out a lot of stuff, like built really small MVPs, so sort of had a look at what the feedback was. And we did a lot of customer development before building anything. So in our case, we then spoke to potential buyers on the platform first and founders who had done acquisitions before. Yeah, at some point you just have to call it and say, okay, we want to do this. And I think it was also a big part of what do we feel capable of doing, because my co-founder comes from the finance side. He worked for like a big American asset manager. I sort of come from the tech side, obviously more sales than anything coding related. But we felt, okay, this is a like fintech marketplace, maybe that sort of goes along with our experience. While we definitely had some other ideas that were a bit more grandiose, where we would have then definitely needed to hire a technical person to do some of the actual real work, which also sometimes feels a bit shitty to go, okay, we're two tech dudes just looking for someone to then build this stuff for us. So the marketplace idea, it's not super technical, or we were able to do it ourselves. So that's also how we landed on making the decision on this idea specifically.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Being able to definitely, I feel like any sort of technical founder does have that advantage in that he can go and build whatever comes to his mind if it's not too big. If it's not too big.
Yeah.
How do you? So a big question that I think about is how do you even market the MVP of an idea to validate it?
It's a lot of direct outreach. So we had, before we even built, I think, the website, we had built a bit of an email lead list of people that we had reached out to primarily on LinkedIn, who we've had calls, conversations with, that then indicated that they're interested. The issue, obviously, with the marketplace is you can't make them pay up front. So we hadn't validated as well as maybe a SaaS product could be validated, but we knew, okay, there's some interest here. And a lot of the early users were very, very manual. We would just reach out to people, had calls with them, told them this is what we want to build, got their feedback. And then once we launched, we sort of got those folks onto the platform. And then our official launch was on Product Hunt. And that was also very impactful for us. So we became second product of the day, and it got us like hundreds of signups at least onto the platform, and already got like a bit of liquidity on the marketplace, i.e., people messaging with each other, buying or trying to buy and sell companies.
I signed up from Product Hunt,
Nice,
which
nice. Also, our first launch.
no, no, I think
Yeah.
it is. Well, it's the last one.
Okay,
It's
the third one. Yeah.
I'm a
So
late
that
late comer.
Yeah, no, no, no. But it's product hunt is very cool. I mean, you can
It
launch
is
like every 6 months or so, and it like doesn't take much time to prepare, and it's just free publicity, always new users. Very, very happy with it.
especially if you find a way to boost it externally. So, like one
Yeah,
thing that you do, which I think is super smart and I think it's super powerful, is just like contact people that already follow you, that already might like you to a degree or might be aware of you at least. And then you're
yeah,
gonna be like, oh, hey, would you like to check out my product on Product Hunt? Maybe shoot it a like. And it's like, how can I say no to that? Of course, even if I don't like the product, I'm gonna come and upvote you. And then if it
yeah,
also, because in our case, it actually happens so that I've been learning about acquisitions for the past few months. It's been a very intriguing subject for me. So it's like,
hmm,
wow, this is actually something really cool, something I'm really interested in. Okay, let me also sign up. And it's like, it's
yeah,
a very cool marketplace. I think it's very cool. One thing that I wanted to ask you about Bits for Digits is how, like, I noticed you don't charge listing fees. So how does the model actually work? How do you make money?
yeah. So we recently changed it a little bit. Before it was only a subscription fee. So buyers on the platform would have to pay us a subscription fee to basically use the marketplace. So everyone gets access for free. But as you'll see, all of the listings are anonymized, so you don't know which company is actually behind the listing. You only get the description, sort of the metrics, how much revenue profit is this company making, but you don't know who the founder is or what the actual company's name is. And then, in
Yeah.
order to message directly with the founder and talk about a potential transaction, you'll have to then pay us a subscription fee. And what we've now, because the subscription fee is not cheap, we feel like for the value that we offer here, it's definitely very reasonable. But the hurdle for someone who's just looking around and might just like feel like, there's only one or two listings that I'm really interested in. We've now tiered it that there's still a subscription fee, but it's only $99 a year. But then in case of a successful transaction, you have to pay a 2% success fee, which can obviously be very, very expensive. So I don't know if I urge anyone to do anything, but if you do the math, I think the regular subscription fee, which is $1,000 a year, might still be pretty affordable. That's sort of where we're at now, but we're always trying out new pricing, new models. But it's important to us that the marketplace is entirely free for founders or business owners looking to sort of have their business sold.
I believe the pricing makes sense.
Yeah, so a lot of more traditional marketplaces either charge through listing fees or they charge through a commission, but both are on the seller's side. And I think that makes sense from a perspective like this is also the person getting paid, like they're making a lot of money. So they should also be paying some money to get their company acquired. But what we found is that it's very difficult to acquire sellers onto the platform as opposed to buyers because buyers are usually always in the market, they're always looking, and sellers, like, it just takes a long time to build a company to a decent
Yeah.
stage where you can then sell it, so there's just much fewer of them. So we thought, like, okay, maybe it's easier to charge the other side of the platform, make money from them, and then we also are thus able to provide all of this for free for the business owners, thus attracting more and higher quality business owners to our platform.
It's kind of a seller's market, I guess,
Yeah, very much is.
which is why we also see high evaluations. So I guess to some degree it does make more sense to be a startup because you get the benefit from that.
I mean, yeah, if you're able to build a successful startup, like that's also not easy.
That's the caveat.
Yeah.
I wanted to also ask you, did you guys raise any money or are you still bootstrapped?
So we're still bootstrapped with a little asterisk that we have a bit of funding slash a grant from the government. So the EU slash German government is fairly supportive of young startups.
Yeah.
So we have gotten a little bit of money and sort of like a very low salary, I guess you could call it, and some office space, which was all provided for us. And that also helped us tremendously to then bootstrap everything until we made like enough ish revenue. But yeah, it was a difficult decision slash still is. So bootstrapping a marketplace super hard. Really takes a lot of elbow grease, especially if you don't have a lot of money to spend on customer acquisition. In the early stages of us launching, we had a lot of VCs reach out to us. Some were, I'd say, fairly interested, and we were maybe a bit bold to say, okay, we want to see how far we can take this bootstrapped, make some transactions first, make some revenue first, and then we also have more leverage. And since then, the market has changed a lot, right? It's very difficult to raise money now. You might not get the conditions that you'd really like to get. But I feel fortunate at the point we've managed to build a business that's actually bootstrapped. So we're in no need of raising capital now. So we can still decide to do so in the future.
I think, well, one thing that I want to mention is I think we're so lucky we are in the EU because there are a lot of grants in here, and a
Yeah.
lot of people don't use them. A lot of people don't know about them. A lot of people are scared of them for whatever reason. And I think less people should be. They're very, very useful. And also, especially, I'm in the crypto space. So, like, crypto companies offer grants for anything. Like, the idea of grant programs is actually much more prevalent than I would have thought 2 years ago. And I think I'm 25, so I think I've lost. I feel like I've lost something by not knowing about grants earlier in my life.
Yeah, there's also entire businesses around helping startups get these grants. Where because I
Really?
mean we're still in Germany. There's always a lot of paperwork to do, a lot of
Um,
bureaucratic hoops to jump through. So
yeah,
that's another whole like subsector that has been built here around just telling you these are all the programs you could qualify for, and let us help you do like the many pages of paperwork that are required to actually get that money.
yeah. But then you do get the money, and then that's always something good.
Exactly.
Yeah, you were also very unlucky with the situation of the like just the economy in general, because just my thought would have been precisely like my thought process would have been precisely like yours and like that. Yeah, obviously if I grow my company I'm gonna get better terms and then I'm gonna be able to keep more of my company and get more money and it's always gonna be better. But then just the crash happens and everything goes down, especially like us in crypto we got hit hard.
Yeah.
um and it's insane. Do you think I mean, obviously, it's in hindsight, and I would think that you would make the same decision if you could go back in time, just because that's the information you know back then. But in hindsight, would you say you made the right call, or were you unlucky?
No, I don't consider myself unlucky because I think if we had raised venture capital, then we would have also grown the company like a venture backed company. We would have basically been on run rate for 18 months, hired a ton of people, spent a ton of money on growth, with then the condition, okay, the next round needs to be raised. And I think it's really tough to raise the next round after in these market conditions. So I think while we would have probably been bigger than we are now, I would feel like the future of Bits for Digits would be much less safe compared
Yeah.
to like the way we've done it now. So I'm actually fairly happy with the decision that we made.
You see, like yeah, you're right. I wouldn't have thought about that right off the top of my mind. But one thing that I want to do before we move on, I cannot pick up the book right now because it's under some books. But there's a book I have right here. It's by Annie Duke. It's called Thinking in Bets. I have
Ah,
shown it
yeah,
on the podcast before, and it relates precisely to what we just talked about, where it's like you could have not known the crash was about to happen. You made the
yeah.
best decision with the information you had. And yeah, you're right. I think you made ultimately the right decision. And ultimately, I think you were even a bit lucky because if you had now to raise another round, that would have been tough.
So we have some venture backed competitors, and I don't know how well they're doing right now. Like I, I'm sure it's very stressful for them because I'm sure they need to raise another round. So that's definitely like some hours of sleep I get every night that they don't. Um,
Yeah.
but of course, like it's just unlucky for everyone. But yeah, I watched your interview with Phil, where you guys talk about poker. Like I
Yeah.
haven't read the book yet, but I've heard many talk about it. So I think I
I
might need to
mean,
pick it up myself too.
to let you in on a very stupid secret, I haven't actually fully read the book either.
Ah, yeah.
I just kind of read the first few chapters. I skimmed the
Yeah.
rest. I read a few summaries, and I got the gist. There might be more, even more in it than I actually found.
I feel like a lot of nonfiction books are also, they could just be long blog posts, and then someone just goes like, this needs to be a book. We just need to make it longer now. So I assume this could also be understood in a few bit fewer pages.
Yeah, the way I like to summarize it is if you were to go in the casino and bet all of your money on zero at the European roulette, you got 1 in 37 chances of winning. And if you do win, you win by a factor of 36. So you put $1 in, you get 36 out. It's an
Yeah.
obvious mathematical big no no. You're going to lose money. But if you do win money, that doesn't make it a good decision. You made a stupid
No.
decision that somehow you were lucky. And
Yeah.
on the contrary, if you lost money, outside of the casino, if you lose money or you make a bad decision, that or a decision that turns out bad, doesn't necessarily mean it was a bad decision. There's a lot to it, and that's the way I like to summarize the book.
I think that's a very, very fair point. It's sometimes tough to think the same way as a startup, but definitely everyone should at least try.
One other thing I want to ask you, I actually have two more questions, and then we can wrap it up.
Cool.
Is what is the one thing, and I think you've kind of already asked, you've kind of already told me, but let's dive deeper into it. What is like a few things that you do for growth in your startup that maybe many startups don't do or don't do the right way?
So we do many, many different things for growth because we have these two sides of the platform, and reaching them and convincing them to join works pretty differently. What has worked fairly well for us is engaging in communities. So, for example, on the founder side, there could be indie hackers, right? And that is not necessarily like messaging people there, like, hey, you should check out this marketplace, but a bit more on the content marketing side, like posting articles there talking about bits for digits, and then some of those posts went up on the front page, and people saw like, okay, this is super interesting. Who wrote this? Okay, what do they do? We reference bits for digits on the articles, and that always gets us like signups, but also a bit of like brand awareness, I guess. Like people in the space are aware of us. Then there's much like in terms of direct outreach. So we used to message people on Twitter directly if we saw that they were sort of posting about the company or considering an acquisition, saying like, hey, maybe you haven't heard of Bits for Digits yet, but this is what sort of speaks for the marketplace. And on the buyer side, it's also a lot of cold email campaigns, as well as at this point, fortunately, a bit of like word of mouth. Like the sort of bubble is not super large, so they also talk amongst each other, compare like their deal flow channels, and then Bits for Digits comes up more and more.
Yeah, I think it's, I'm not going to name any names, but it's you and one other company in the space that are definitely growing. And you guys are kind of taking over what used to be the big free sites for selling a site, for selling a company. You're definitely, it seems like you're doing it better. And it seems like you're growing for that.
I mean, I also don't mind mentioning competitors, obviously, but I think everyone sort of suits their own role. I think Flipper has been sort of the juggernaut in this business for a very, very long time, and I think they are predominantly focused on these affiliate sites slash content blog businesses, and they're slowly also moving a bit upmarket. I see like a SaaS business there every once in a while, but they're very much almost like a broker, right? They help you through the entire transaction. They take like a fairly sizable commission as well, right? They have a completely different business model to what we do. There's micro acquire, right? They have a more similar business model to what we have. I think that the companies tend to be like a little bit smaller, right? You need to have like at least 100,000 in annual revenue on our platform to even get listed. There I also see a lot of like smaller, like maybe side projects. And then, but obviously, they also have a larger range. There's tiny acquisitions, which I always refer people to that don't have enough revenue to list on our platform. I'm a big fan. It's also an indie hacker who built that. So if you have something that only makes a few K or maybe even no revenue yet, list there. But yeah, there's a lot of players in this big market focusing on individual sort of like niches within it.
I didn't know about tiny acquisitions. I'm going to check it out. But yeah, definitely it is a big market. And I think there's room for everyone. And I think there's a lot to be done because, as you said earlier, a lot of people want to buy companies. Like, I was not aware of even the concept of an. So my father was a business person. He was a very successful business person, but I never have ever seen him either buy a business or sell a business. I've never seen his friends buy a business or sell a business. It was always, oh, I'm going to start a new location or I'm going to start a new idea. It was never, I'm going to buy something that exists or I'm going to sell something. And if
Yeah.
usually the ones that retired were like, just, oh, yeah, I'm just going to actually close the company, sell the assets. It was never actually sell the contract.
And I mean, we're only in the space of selling internet businesses, right? I'm sure there's a much, much larger section, which is
Yeah.
offline businesses. And especially now with a lot of baby boomers going into retirement, there's a lot of businesses to be picked up. And I think, to be honest, also huge, huge opportunity for someone who is maybe interested in going into a more boring type of business to buy something really, really on the cheap and then building something really cool from there.
To me personally, I would never buy a physical business. I'm all online and I love it. But just to
Yeah.
ask you, why did you decide not to focus at all on like traditional businesses?
So for our marketplace, we're a global marketplace, right? So I think roughly half of our users on both sides of the platform come from North America. And then it's sort of distributed. There's a heavy focus on the UK and Germany, but really it's all over the place. And businesses can be bought and sold, or like shares can be bought and sold much easier if it's bits that are moving and not atoms, right? Like you can do a due diligence of a Belgian business from Canada pretty easily if it's an internet business. It's
Yeah.
very difficult if it's like a Belgian hair salon, where you then have to go and look at the actual like store and equipment and that kind of stuff. So marketplaces for more offline physical businesses, they tend to be much more localized. And we wanted to build something that's just global. And their internet businesses are much easier to deal with as opposed to real physical locations.
To wrap it up, one question which I ask everybody. Well, there's a few questions which I kind of ask everybody, but this is the
Yeah.
first one that I give you that I ask everybody.
Yeah.
Is, do you have any advice for your younger self?
Yeah, I would advise myself to just learn a couple more technical things, like very simple, like building websites, because I think I was always very interested in testing out ideas, thinking about startup ideas, thinking of new businesses in general. But especially in the earlier years, it never really became anything. I just thought about stuff. I talked to other people about it. Maybe I found like a potential partner, but then it just kind of fizzled out. I think if I had learned how to at least build like very basic websites and do like a little bit more in terms of marketing, I could have at least gotten to this validation phase much more quickly.
It makes a lot of sense. I want to make not a lot of pushback, but I want to slightly push back on it because
Yeah,
it just dawned on me literally that part of how I started coding was just me thinking if I could build a website, I could make my own startup. And
yeah.
now I am a software engineer and I don't have a startup. So, who knows what sort of rabbit hole you would have went on if you would have.
I don't know. I think it's just a lot of the hurdles to becoming a founder are much smaller than one thinks. So everyone's always afraid of like, okay, quitting my job. Actually, you don't need to quit your job. You can just do something on the side, see if it works before doing anything. Or oh, okay, I need to like launch this giant product. Actually, like building an MVP is fair enough, and then just see
Yeah.
if anyone's even interested
Yeah.
or not. So I think just taking some more steps in this direction would have at least reduced my anxiety towards going down this path. It would have just helped me become a bit more comfortable with the steps, maybe learn a few things a bit more early in my career. But yeah, only being
Yeah.
technical isn't enough either. Yeah.
Definitely not enough. Definitely not enough. I guess that's it. We can say bye to the audience. Yeah, bye, people.
Bye, people. Thank you so much for having me, Alex.
Thank you. Thank you as well for coming on.